Alright. Let's do this thing.
Welcome to the Bowls of Life podcast. I'm Virginia.
You always read that wrong. It says I'm Tyler.
I also didn't even say my name right.
You said Virginia.
I like Virginia.
Try again. So, do it again. Do it again. You got this. I got faith in you. You got this.
Welcome to the Bowls of Life podcast. I'm Virginia.
And I'm Virginia. See, the line says I'm Virginia. As we've gone through life, we've learned something important.
Life is messy. There are a lot of armchair experts out there who will try to tell you how to make life simple.
But it ain't. So you won't find any here. Instead, you're going to find everyday people who have jumped into the mess of life and are making an adventure of it.
Yep.
Yes. You did a good job.
We are making an adventure of it.
We are making an adventure of it. Speaking of adventures, I thought we could start by telling about how Luna tried to murder us.
Yeah.
Her daughter tried to murder us, guys. 15-month-old tried to kill us. How'd she do that, babe?
Well, she came home from school one day. She was doing great. She was fine. Put her to bed. She slept well.
Didn't wake up like at all that night.
No. I think there was like one outcry, which normally is just like a rollover.
Mm-hmm.
Tyler goes to get her out of the bed the next morning, and he calls me in there, and it frightened me because, I don't know, I just imagined blood immediately. But it was not blood. It was
vomit.
The contents of her stomach.
Yes.
Her dinner the night before.
We had homemade pizza with ham slices, and so there were ham slices in her bed.
It was so good.
And stuck in her hair.
And her hair smelled like vomit for
days.
After several washings.
Yes, just to be clear, we did bathe our child immediately, and then again that night, she still smelled.
So what's going on? We're already like freaking out about COVID and wondering if we should get tested for COVID for other reasons.
Yeah, we had some exposures.
And we had a cold, like a random cold that week. So we're like, we'll just keep her home from school. She acted fine, maybe a little lower appetite, but she's Luna. She eats everything.
Yes.
And about 5 o'clock that evening, it hit me.
Yeah, it did.
It had been kind of bowling in my stomach, but I don't think I knew it. I don't think I realized it.
Yep.
So I had it. I had the stomach virus. And Tyler was doing great. He was taking care of me, leaving me alone, getting me what I needed.
Mm-hmm.
And the next day, I felt exhausted.
Sure. How'd you do?
Tyler was fine, no big deal. Like, I was like, cool, okay, he's not going to get it. He's normally the one who gets the virus.
Yeah. No, I was busy running around doing all sorts of other things because our lead pastor had the COVID. And so getting lots of things done last minute, running around was good.
So Tyler's immune system was like...
It was sheer willpower, let's just be honest. My body, I just told my body, I was like, hey, you literally can't be sick right now. There's no way.
And my immune system, I swear, because I've been home for several months, like several months since March.
Like March, yeah.
I've probably not got as great of an immune system anymore. Because I never get sick. I literally haven't had the stomach virus since I was in the 5th grade.
You had it in Australia, babe.
No, that was like a bug. That wasn't like what I had the other last week. It was not the same thing, I promise.
But yeah, so Virginia was sick. I'm running around, kind of recovered. Virginia did.
We're trying to
Friday.
Yeah, by Friday I felt better, and that was the day that we were supposed to go to Arkansas.
On vacation.
With our siblings.
Yep.
And
so I got done with the things I needed to do first thing that morning.
Yeah. Finished my work.
You wrapped up some work.
We get on the 5.5 hour trek.
And as I'm driving, I knew. Like, I 100% knew along the way.
But he never said anything.
Because I was like, ugh. I can make this drive. We'll get there, and I may just have to stay in the room, and so be it. Like, it'll be okay. Virginia and Luna can go and have fun. I'll just be in the room, a little miserable, whatever. But that is not how it went down.
We were halfway there. We were literally 2.5 hours approximately.
In either direction.
Yeah, like we could go to the cabin and be miserable, or we could go home for the same amount of time, like in the car.
Either way, I was going to be sick as we went
as
in
we
either
drove
direction.
The remainder of the trip.
Yeah, and so that...
and I mean, we're going to see my brother and his wife and their 7-month-old too, so it's like, okay, I mean, in our 1.5-year-old, or not 1.5, but close to, like, she wasn't bothered too much by it.
No.
But we don't want to get anybody else sick.
Right.
Because it can, some of ours can be really bad. It was really bad, but,
yes.
We don't want babies getting sick. So I just whipped that car around. I mean, I had to get in the driver's seat at this point. And we drove home.
Yeah, we did.
Made several stops on the way.
I was going to say, it took
on the side of the road.
Quite a while because I needed you to stop fairly frequently.
Yeah, and I don't want to admit to how fast I was going at one point because I was like, we just got to get back. We just got to get back.
At which point I looked up and went, hey, maybe don't go that fast. Which says a lot.
I knew where we were. I knew there were no cops. I'm just trying to get you home.
I wasn't worried about the cops. It was okay.
Well, I definitely don't want a speeding ticket.
Well, that too.
As fast as I was going.
Yeah. So
that's what we dealt with last week. So that's why we didn't actually record an episode last week, which doesn't really matter to you guys listening. Yeah. But I feel like it's been a minute, so I'm excited.
It has. Yeah,
to be back.
We've been recording a week in advance. That way, if something like that were to happen, we'd be okay.
And we will not have an episode on the week of Thanksgiving, so you guys can enjoy time with your family and catch up if you haven't.
100% catch up on past episodes, for sure.
But today's episode, we're bringing to you the next part in our series based on God's Big Picture of the Bible by Vaughn Roberts. Mm-hmm. And that's why we say if you haven't caught up, you might want to go back and listen to how the Bible was formed and the other episodes after that so that you can be in the know.
Yes, 100%, because we talked about, of course, how the Bible was formed. We dug into that one, had some fun, getting to nerd out a little bit on some of those things. Then we talked about the pattern of the kingdom, which is where the whole pattern that all of this follows comes from. God's people, God's place, and God's rule and blessing that comes straight out of Genesis 1 and 2. And then we kind of talked about the fall and some of the aftermath of it in the perished kingdom. Excuse me. I wanted to call it the partial kingdom, but that's into the future. No, right now, today's episode, we're talking about the promised kingdom. And we're not going to cover too much more of the story, but we're going to get some maybe slightly different perspective on some of what we've talked about and a little bit of new as far as the overall story of the Bible goes today.
Awesome. I'm really excited. We've talked through the creation, the humans and their fall with the serpent, and now I'm excited to talk about like where God's gonna bring it back to Him, because last week it was like doom and gloom and perished kingdom.
Yeah,
and I had to make sure we inserted at the end like it's not the end. This is not the end, and all of you probably know this, but it's not the end.
So what you're saying is it's not the end of the world as we know it?
The end of the world as we know it.
And no, do you feel fine?
Not. What?
Do you feel fine?
Is that the next line?
Yes.
Okay.
It's the end of the world as we know it. And he says that about 3 times, and then he goes, but I feel fine, and I feel fine. Something like that. I don't know.
Okay, yeah. Tyler always corrects me on my lyrics.
Yes.
So, here is where God's promise to Abraham will give us a little bit of hope, right?
Yes.
A lot of hope, actually.
Actually, all the hopes.
All the hope. The only hope you need.
All the hopes. Yes, 100%. So, let's dive into it, babe.
Yeah, so God created humans, and He knew that they were going to fall.
Yes. They were going to trip. Sometimes that happens to Luna, too.
Yeah.
She's really bad about stepping on her feet or
He
things.
knew they were going to rebel. Like, they are like, I created you, but you were selfish. That's kind of what he was thinking, right?
Sure.
So if he knew it was going to happen, like, why, this is the thought here. Like, why did he do it then? Like, why did he create us in the first place? If he knew we were going to rebel.
Solid question.
Where does it tell us that answer in the Bible?
It does not. It is not in there at all. That's not even remotely a thing it ever tries to answer, which is just really frustrating.
And it doesn't answer it, but doesn't it?
Does it?
Yeah.
Okay, well, then what's the answer?
Well, can we talk about it?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I think that even though it doesn't say why God created us, even though he knew we were going to fall or rebel, why did God create us in the first place? Well, we believe that it was to bring him glory, which honestly we were a huge disappointment apparently. But
I mean, he does say that in Noah's time. He's
right.
like, I regret this.
I regret.
What a horrible, horrible thing to hear. That's like your parent looking at you and going, I literally wish you were never born.
That's terrible.
Yes.
So, I think, like, in all, we know that God, we are created in his image and to bring glory, to know him and to make him known, to bring him glory. And I guess that's really it. Yeah. So that's what I was thinking. Like, how technically the Bible does answer that, but not, like, directly.
Fair enough.
What would you say?
Why did God make us anyway? I mean, I think I'd say similar things to what you kind of dove into right there. I don't know. I didn't have my answer ready for that one, I'm going to be honest.
But, like, grace. I mean, I feel like you would have gone in that direction too, like, to show his grace, because...
Yeah, 100%. That's definitely part of it. I don't know. It's one of those questions where when you rabbit trail on it pretty quick, like, why did God create? Did he need somebody to experience his grace? No. He didn't need anyone to do anything. He's perfectly complete in his three-in-oneness that he was in as God the Father, God the Son, and God the Spirit. And literally nothing else exists except him. I don't know what that means, but that's what it is. And he's just there, and he needs nothing. He didn't create because he needed someone to give him glory. He didn't create because he needed to give someone grace. Like, he didn't need anything. He created because he wanted to.
Which is still just like, wow.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Doesn't it feel nice to, be wanted? Especially by the creator of the universe?
Yes. That is...
Like, he didn't need you, but he wanted you, and he created you.
Yep. That's
even though you were going to rebel, and you do rebel.
Yes.
Wow. So, it happened.
It happened.
The
fall.
The humans.
The rebellion.
And God has always had a plan to rescue the humans.
That's Romans 1. Talking about the fact that God has a plan in place even before creation. Jesus is the plan. 100%. He's going to rescue us.
Yeah, so did he rescue us for us? Like, to make us happy?
No. Not even a little bit. Yet again, like, it's this false idea it's easy to get because we're not God, and we've never experienced not needing anything. Like, to being 100% complete just in your existence. Like, even if you're completely wealthy and you can afford anything, you still need. You still need water. You still need food. You still need something. That isn't God. He in no way needs any of those things. He simply exists. Well, he also doesn't need us to be happy, but he chooses to rescue us for his sake. It's it's a common theme you find in Scripture where it talks about God did this for His name's sake, or in other words, He did this to kind of go with the phrase you used a minute ago, to make Himself known. That's why God goes through this rescuing process. Is He's a good God. He cares, but He does this so that we'll acknowledge Him, I guess.
Yeah.
So we talked about in the last episode, pretty much all of Scripture. You can find this theme of the fall, of Genesis 3 being reenacted over and over and over again, where someone they maybe see something or they desire something, and instead of doing the wise thing in those situations, they often take it, even if that taking of whatever it is clearly the wrong choice. That happens, and then so often there's the try and the hide of what you did, and then eventually there's the consequences, the results of it, and the ultimate results of all of those things are judgment. And so that's really easy to see in the beginning of Genesis and throughout Scripture, that this reenacting over and over, it leads to judgment. But there's something else you actually see behind that as well, as there's grace. Let's track back in some of the stories we've already talked about. In the fall, you see grace. How do you see grace in the fall, babe?
Well, God could have just gotten rid of Adam and Eve, but He didn't. He actually took them out. I don't know if that's the right use of that verb.
He sought after them.
He sought after them.
Yes.
And covered them with grace and literal clothes. And I mean, there was consequences, and there was things. I don't know, it's punishment, I guess.
No, yeah, that's right.
Punishment.
Yeah. But there was the grace in the literal sacrifice that God makes on their behalf.
Yeah.
In the midst of this. And then you track just the next chapter into Genesis 4 with Cain and Abel. And Cain, he gets cursed in very similar ways to what his parents do. But there's also grace in there, and that grace is this mark of Cain. We always think of it as such a negative thing, but this was a literal act of grace of God, of going, hey, if this is Cain, you can clearly tell by whatever this mark is that he has, and you are not to kill Cain, even though this is a guy who super duper deserves it. He committed the first murder. He invented it. He invented murder. But there's grace in it. The guy Lamech that we talked about for a minute, and that whole long genealogy there of descendants from Cain. There's this guy, Enoch. Enoch is the grace in that chapter where you see a guy who walks with God and doesn't face the same consequences as everyone else. Instead of death, his story ends with he walked with God and then he just wasn't. And there's grace in that. Another story we talked about, Noah, and Noah really leans into this covenant that comes from Noah. But there's God looks at the world and goes, I regret it. I regret all of this creation of humans.
Yeah, apparently it was so bad that God wanted to get rid of them all, get completely rid of His creation, start over, and He could have completely wiped humans out, and started over, really started over, or created a more obedient person. I mean, He could have done that.
Yep.
But He kept Noah, and He allowed Noah and his family to live, and continue growing on the earth.
Yeah, which is a literal act of grace right then and there.
Right.
The allowing of Noah and his family to survive. And
I get it. Some people would probably see a story like that, especially not knowing God, and even maybe having some knowledge of God growing up, and could see that a story like that and just be like, well, that's not very gracious that he killed everybody with the flood. But I always like to stop and think, you know, we have to remember who God is.
Yes.
And why it was such a terrible sin. Like, why sin was so bad. Or why it is so bad. Like, what is the, we sometimes we think about sin as not being that bad, but like, who are you sinning against? You're sinning against God, the creator of the universe. That's when you have to realize, like, okay, yeah, God is justified. Totally.
Right. I mean, and punishment is due when something wrong is done. And it's that simple. But when God chooses to not do it, not to punish, I mean, that is a literal act of grace. This section of Vaughn Roberts' book, it's referred to as the promised kingdom. And that promised kingdom comes straight from covenants. When you think about a covenant, what do you think of, babe?
A covenant community with a homeowners association.
Ooh, I like that. Let's run with it.
Okay.
What is a covenant community?
When you, we don't live in one, but it's like a community of people who live in the same area and they abide by certain rules and laws. Like, you can only have your trash can out for, one day, and you have to put it back up, and you have to have your grass mowed, and you can't park in your yard, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Your mailboxes have to look exactly the same. That's kind of how I see it. But no, everybody kind of abides by these rules of the HOA and, their community. And I think there's just some sort of like safety in it too, safety and security in it as well. Because I guess, you know that somebody is like kind of overseeing the neighborhood. Yeah, I don't know. That's about as, I think you pay for it too, so.
Yes. Yeah, you do pay to be a part of an HOA, my understanding. Anyway, yeah. So, a covenant. In this community of people who live together in their various homes in a certain area, they have...
So, you are, like, I guess when you join, you have to kind of promise?
Yes.
I don't know. I mean, you promise that you're going to abide by the rules?
Yeah, I mean, you literally sign a contract.
Yeah, a contract. There you go.
Yes. Yeah. A covenant, in a lot of ways, is similar to a contract. It's a solemn vow, promise, commitment, agreement
between two parties.
Yes. And doesn't have to be just two parties,
sure.
But yes. It's this agreement to do a thing. And so with Noah and his family comes the first time God makes a covenant of this sort, and he makes a promise. What does he promise Noah and his family?
That he will never flood the earth again.
Yes.
I almost forgot.
I can tell. You were thinking hard there.
But a covenant with God, a promise from God is real different than a promise between two humans.
Yes, that is 100% accurate. God isn't going to break his part of the promise.
Right.
And that's part of the thing with covenants.
So he's not making a promise that he's not going to follow through on.
Yes. Yeah, and so sometimes he makes covenants in the Bible where it is contingent upon people, and sometimes he makes them and like he's the only one who is going to upkeep a part of it, and there's not actually a requirement on the other party. In this Noah one, there's not any kind of requirement on humans. He doesn't go, he just says, hey, if you guys don't suck, I won't flood the earth again.
Right. He says, I'll never do that again.
Yep, just full stop. I'll never do that again.
Yeah, he just says, I'll never do that again.
Full stop.
I was yawning, so I wanted to say it better.
No, you said it great. It was fine.
Okay.
It was okay. How does he let the people know that, to kind of remember, there's a sign or a symbol that kind of seals the deal?
Rainbow.
A rainbow. Do you know the order?
Red, orange, yellow, green, indigo. Wait. Roy G. Blue, indigo, violet. Roy G. Biv.
Nice. I couldn't have done that. It was impressive.
An artist
An artiste.
knows the
Okay.
colors.
Well, that's good. So you like draw those on babies' walls and stuff to help them know that God's never going to flood the earth. I'm not sure why we want babies to know that.
Grace, because they're beautiful. Rainbows are awesome.
Rainbows are pretty.
Like, you would never think you could put those colors together in the order that they're in, or in a different order, and they would look good. But in that order, it's so satisfying.
Complementary colors and tertiary colors. I learned those words in Art 101 in college.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyways.
I know things about colors. So, covenants. But Noah's covenant isn't the only one that happens in the Bible. There's also the Abrahamic covenant.
Abrahamic?
What's the covenant? What do you know about that one?
That's the covenant where God promises that Abraham will be a father to many nations, and they will live in a land flowing with milk and honey and under God's blessing and rule.
Yep. Well, that's kind of wrapped up in there. And do you remember the sign of it?
Yes.
What is it?
Circumcision.
How do you feel about circumcision, babe?
Well, I don't have to worry about it.
That's true. I mean, I know a little bit about circumcision. I really don't know much about circumcision. I've never felt the desire to
if we ever have a
look
boy,
into it. Yeah,
we'll have to figure it out.
I'm not sure I want to have a boy for that exact reason. I don't want to have to make that decision for my child. To just be perfectly honest, like, well, I don't want to have to stick with the decision in the future either, because that's worse. I mean, imagine you're Abraham and God looks at you and is like, "Hey, you're gonna do circumcision at 99," and Abraham's like, "Okay, cool. What's that exactly?" And then God tells him, and Abraham's like, "Oh, bro, I don't know about that. That feels like a thing I don't want to do, quite frankly."
Yeah, I don't know. This is one of those things where it's just like, I don't know why you did that, God. Maybe it was because you had already cursed women with their problems with child labor and not child labor, but
the labor of a child.
The labor of a child, delivery, and monthly illnesses. So
illnesses? Is illness the right word?
I mean,
you feel pretty ill. Okay, I'll give you that.
But yeah, I don't understand. We're just being funny here, but seriously, I don't know why God chose that.
And yeah, it's not a very visible sign, frankly.
No, and it was something that was even once Jesus came, people were like, "Oh, to be a Christian, you have to be circumcised." And I was like, no, that's not the rule anymore. But people were still really following that.
Oh, absolutely. But
even
not
when they didn't have to.
So, but not as heavily, and that kind of factors in a little bit there. So, when Hellenization happened, I'm going to rabbit trail for a second. But when Hellenization happened, and they start building gymnasiums that have the big Roman baths and things, in Jerusalem and places like that in Israel, that means a lot of guys are hanging around in the bathhouse. Maybe you're covered with a form of a towel or something, but often you're not.
Right.
And so it was very clear who was Jewish and who wasn't because of circumcision. And so it kind of started this trend where Jewish people started not circumcising as much.
Huh.
Yeah, because you didn't fit in, and you didn't want your kid to not fit in. And so you didn't circumcise them.
That's so interesting. I love dumb facts like that.
Society. I think that would fall under sociology. I took that class once, too. See, 2 classes I took in college that definitely impacted my future.
Sure.
Art and sociology.
So, circumcision marks the covenant, the Abrahamic covenant.
Yes.
And it was only, technically it was only a stipulation for the men.
Yes, yeah.
But that, I guess they were over their family.
Right, 100%. It is a very patriarchal society in Old Testament times, not just in Jewish, but worldwide. Yeah, so that's part of it. The next big covenant is the Mosaic covenant, aka the law, essentially, and upkeeping the law. And so the sign of that one is.
I'm sorry, I was thinking about something.
Oh, what were you thinking about?
It's really more of a woman thing, but I called it a monthly illness. I feel really bad now because it's actually a sign of fertility, and that's actually a gift from God. So I just wanted to. I didn't actually want to say that, but since you asked, I guess I should stop and say it's a gift from God. So
yeah. I like that,
and it's a gift in the sense that not everybody gets it, and that's difficult too. But that we're not going there. Today.
No. I'm okay with that though. I appreciate that you addressed it. Yeah. But the Mosaic covenant, there is a symbol, a sign that kind of represents it, and it's actually the Sabbath. We always think about the Sabbath as like all the way back to Genesis 1 and 2, and it's definitely there. It's day 7, God rests. But the Sabbath itself is not actually a full-on thing until the Mosaic Law is laid out, and that's when it's like, hey, don't work on the Sabbath and all that jazz. And so that is a representation of, or a symbol that represents it.
That's right. We were talking about this recently, about how the Sabbath is like taking the Sabbath is really a big part of
being Jewish.
Yeah.
And following the law.
Following, the law. I was going to say the Lord, but yeah.
I was listening to Bible Project again, and Tim Mackey was talking about when he lived in Jerusalem for like a year or two, or Israel, I don't know if it's Jerusalem. Anyway, they would talk about how not everyone, but a vast majority of the people would Sabbath, and because the Sabbath starts at like 6 p.m. on Friday and runs through 6 p.m. on Saturday, you talk about just the way the that world changed so much on like Friday afternoons, and then literally nothing is going on throughout Saturday, and just the way what's the word I'm looking for? It just saturated all of their society on that day.
Yeah. So, and over here in America, work.
Absolutely. But yeah, it's a representation of the Mosaic Law. I'd say at this point you're technically not under a requirement to Sabbath, but there is a ton of wisdom in Sabbathing regularly.
Yeah.
And then the next one we'll kind of mention is the New Covenant, aka Jesus, and all the things that Jesus brings to the table, and we'll dig into that one a bit later in episodes. My wife is literally flexing into the camera right now. I don't know why.
I don't know why either, because I don't even have a muscle.
Yeah, it was very distracting, babe. I don't even know. I was talking about Jesus, so I know that much.
But the New Covenant is the covenant that we are now under as Christians.
Yes, that is 100% accurate.
What is the sign of the New Covenant?
Ooh, it's baptism.
Is it?
It is.
So you're saying if I don't get baptized, I'm not a Christian?
No, I'm saying it's a symbol of it.
Are you saying that to get to be a Christian, I have to get baptized?
No, I'm not saying that, but I would say that it is wise to.
I think it's following.
Yeah,
it's being obedient.
100%.
Jesus tells us to get baptized, but the baptism is a symbol of, say it how we say it.
It's an outward symbol of an inward life transformation?
Yes, that one.
Okay, gotcha. I was trying to think of how we say it. But yes, that is 100% right. Cool, so why do you think God makes all these covenants?
Well, he's a God of his word.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the right way to say that?
Sure, yeah.
He's, he keeps his word, and I just, I think that's a valuable thing. Mm-hmm. I think just in humanity, we appreciate when we can trust somebody and they keep their word, but we appreciate that because of who our God is, who our Creator is. So, honestly, I think it's just God's way of being in agreement with us and being in community with us, but also in a very trusting and honorable way.
Yeah, I like that. I'd go with One, it proves God is faithful in the way he says that he is. Like,
Absolutely.
think about the Noahic covenant and Noahic covenant.
Mm-hmm.
Words are hard.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that he has not destroyed the world in a flood.
Exactly.
And so I can check back and go, there's no flood that the world has been destroyed in.
Right.
Except the one. And so, yeah.
And then the end of the world will not be a flood.
Yeah. And from what I understand, not that I've ever studied this, but I had a professor that was a bit of an archaeologist. He talked about it. He said, there seems to only be any representation of one potential flood that was super global. He said, beyond that, there's no evidence for one. So, one.
And you'll find, this is just another one of those cool facts, like, you'll find in many other religions, like, they always point back to some sort of flood. Not all of them, but, like, some religions that are outside of Christianity, like, point back to an old flood. Yeah,
it's referenced pretty regularly in some Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, old, what am I looking for? Epics and stories, things like that. Like the Epic of Gilgamesh, that's pretty well known. It literally references a flood story and the one guy who survived it on a boat. I forget his name, but he's in the story.
Oh.
Gilgamesh goes and seeks him out. It's been a long time since I read that one. Did that in a lit class in college. 3 college class references. Man, I don't know why I'm into those tonight, but
wow.
I am.
I read it, but I don't remember anything about it.
Yeah, well, that's not new for you, babe. Let's be honest.
Yep.
I'm a sponge when it comes to stupid random things and
everything. Just everything.
I don't know everything.
So why did God make these covenants?
God made these covenants. Let's see, because to prove that He is who He says He is.
Faithful.
He's faithful. I think there's something there in Him just going, here's something you can trust. Like if He doesn't make these covenants to let us know, like if He never tells Noah and his family, hey, I'm not going to destroy the world in a flood again. I mean, every single day I'm going to be working on a boat if He hasn't promised otherwise, because who knows? I mean, the other guys, the other millions or whatever thousands, I don't know how many people were on the earth, but however many of them there were, they didn't get a word from God about it, and boom, there was a flood.
Right.
So, yeah, it proves we've got something to trust or in Him. It tells us what He's doing. I mean, there's a ton of other ones we could chase with, but I think those are probably my 2 big ones. Like it proves He's faithful, and He's telling us what He's doing. He's bringing us into His work. I think those are the 2 big ones. And if you want to lean into the Mosaic one, I think there is some thought there also along the lines of He's proving that we can't do it on our own. We can't perfectly do a thing.
Sure. Yeah,
that's in there too.
Cool.
Yeah, let's take a quick break and we'll hop back in with some more awesome things.
All right, welcome back. We are here to talk about the Tower of Babel.
Yeah, we are, except that's such a weird way to say it. I mean, it's how Vaughn Roberts said it in the video we watched.
He's Australian, though, so they say things
he's British.
Different. Oh.
Yeah, it's because his website's .uk. That's how I know he's British.
So Vaughn Roberts speaks differently than us, and that's okay.
He does. I'm going to pause and go, our dog just like rolled over and now looks dead. She's like paws up in the air.
But you can hear her snoring, so she's not dead.
Yeah, she snores almost as bad as I do. It's impressive. But yeah, the Tower of Babel.
Or Babel.
Or Babel
so
if you're American.
About.
Yes. The Tower of Babel. So things happen there, and if you read that story and you get to the end of it, there doesn't feel like there was a lot of grace in there in the same way you can pull grace out in the other stories.
So these folks, they built a tower because they were trying to be their own god, basically.
Yeah, they think they're awesome.
And then God was like, no. And he smited them. No. He smote. He smote them.
I'm
and
just kidding.
He sent them all in different directions and made them babble in different languages so they couldn't understand each other, which is how we got various languages, right?
Yes. Yeah, it is how we got various languages.
Also, the panacea was broke apart.
The what?
Just kidding, I don't know.
What? You talking about Pangea?
Pangea?
Yeah.
Whatever.
You talk about when the whole Earth is
Yeah.
one thing, or all the continents
Yeah.
are one thing, and then they spread apart. Yeah, I don't know. There is one reference somewhere in Genesis, I forget where, that talks about there was this great earthquake.
Yes, and the
I
land
don't know.
split. It's
Yeah.
just something like that. It's really interesting.
It is interesting. It's a decent
And anyways,
theory.
it could be like when God created the earth, he created like the land all at one time and then like made it split then.
Yeah, he like poked his finger
God
in it
could
and
do
broke
it
apart.
Ever he wants. But
That
anyways,
is accurate. We're so rabbit trailing.
he sent these folks in different directions and
Yeah.
had different languages. So, yeah, where's the grace?
Yeah, where's the grace? Well, the grace isn't actually in Genesis 11. It doesn't happen until...
Where the story happens.
Yes, it happens in Genesis 12, and about a generation of people later, in this story of a guy named Abram, who we better know as Abraham. God speaks to him in Genesis 12, verses 1 through 3, and he says, "Leave your country, your family." I'm going to pause. I'm reading this in the Message. It's very similar, but it's slightly different, and I like to do that sometimes just to kind of give us a new perspective. Anyway, Genesis 12 says, "Leave your country, your family, and your father's home for a land that I will show you. I'll make you a great nation, and I'll bless you. I'll make you famous. You'll be a blessing. I'll bless those who bless you, and those who curse you, I'll curse. All the families of the earth will be blessed through you." And that's actually where the grace comes to Genesis 11, is in this, because if you think about it, the real judgment that happens at the Tower of Babel, it's the scattering of people, and part of that scattering is the changing of languages, but it's them having to be scattered out and forced all away from each other. And God is now looking and going, "Hey, I'm actually going to create a people that I bring together, and I'm going to bless all the peoples through this one people group. There's going to be a blessing to all of these scattered people, and then they'll be brought back near as my family, as my people as a whole." And so the grace that happens for the Tower of Babel is a promise for a future that's coming. And there's three big parts to the promise. The first one is, "I'll make you a great nation." It's a promise of people. The second part of it is a land. He's going to take them to this land that he shows them, that he gives them. And then there's this blessing that is going to reverse the cursing that happens. Because that's all he talks about in there, is how he's going to bless, he's going to bless, he's going to bless. It's reversing the curse that happened in the fall. It's a salvation of the people through this one people group.
Known as the Israelites.
Known as the Israelites. The ones who would be a priest to the nations. That was really what the Israelites' calling was to be a priest, an entire nation of priests. I mean, yes, there's the high priest and the priest, and they're set up, but even the individual everyday person was meant to be a priest in the sense of how they carried God to the people around them. And that bleeds over into Christianity, in that, yes, there are, to use church words, shepherds, elders, not church words, biblical words, shepherds, elders, deacons, and those are clear leaders in the church, but literally a priesthood of a people. Where I think it's 1 Peter maybe that talks about we're supposed to be a nation of priests, aka a people of priests, God's people who carry that blessing throughout the world.
And the blessing is knowing him.
It is. It's being his people.
Right.
And so to follow that pattern that we rolled out in the first episode, in the pattern of the kingdom, God's people. So God's people right now are what?
Abraham's descendants, who have been promised to be God's people because of his grace.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. God's place.
The place in this sense, or in this case, is Canaan. It's promised to be the everlasting possession of Abraham's descendants. So it's the land flowing with milk and honey.
Yes. And you can get into some political things. There's the whole America supporting Israel because they
we gonna go there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to dig deep
I know, I
this,
don't know a lot about this.
But America supports Israel, and a theory, part of why that was because of this Christian thought process that Israel is God's promised place, and so
to protect it.
Yeah, to protect it. There's a whole lot of that. Now, I don't think that's as much the process anymore. It's now that Israel is, super powerful in the sense that they have great military and things like that. But, potato, potato.
Yes, Canaan.
Yes, so Canaan. And then God's rule and God's blessing. Tell me about that.
So Abraham's descendants will be blessed, and through that blessing, they will bless all the peoples of the earth, which includes you and me. So the curse of the fall is now replaced with the blessing of salvation through Abraham's descendants.
Yep, that's 100% right. Cool. So when you think about Noah and you read his story and you kind of see what happens there, there's this moment where it talks about the fact that Noah was a righteous man, and that's why God chose him. And that's why his family is saved. So what qualifies Abraham to be the one chosen to father all of God's people? Because you don't get that same kind of statement with Abraham. Any thoughts?
I think God had a plan. He knew when it was time, and maybe Noah wasn't the time.
Sure.
I don't think it was anything Noah did wrong. Maybe it could have been. I don't know.
Yeah.
But obviously it was just in God's timing.
Sure. Yep. And I'm not necessarily saying like Abraham versus Noah, Noah versus Abraham. Just more of a thought process. Like you get this clear thing with Noah listed right there with him, but you don't necessarily get it with Abraham. But the thing that you do get with Abraham is that he believes God in all of this. He's faithful, or he has faith in what God tells him. Like, just imagine how crazy it is. I don't know how God shows up and talks to Abraham. We don't get a play-by-play for that moment. But, like, imagine somehow God speaks to you, whether he shows up as an angel or he speaks directly in your head, and so he's like, hey, I want you to leave everything you've ever known, go to a place I'm going to tell you about, because he doesn't go, hey, go to Canaan. He says, go to a place I'm going to tell you about, later. Right. Go there, and that place is going to be yours, and you're going to be the father of this multitude at 99, and your wife's 90. And sure, maybe they age differently, but 99 and 90 still old, either which way. And so, just do the thing. That sounds crazy. If I'm 99 and I see that or I hear that, like, my first thing is, well, guess my mind finally snapped. I have, in fact, gone crazy. I should probably go see a therapist or a doctor or something and get checked out. Like, that's where I'm going to go first. But Abraham believes God, and it's credited to him as righteousness. And so one of the things I wanted to tie this in with is, honestly, the whole promised kingdom section is a section about the grace of God. And faith in and of itself is grace. Genuinely. So, God could have created us in a way, or spoke in a way that we couldn't believe. Mm-hmm. God could easily do things in a way where we could just look at it and go, yeah, that's ridiculous, that's crazy, I don't believe that. He could harden our hearts and make us not believe. But he creates a way for that to happen. It's this moment of grace where God goes, hey, I'm going to speak to you in a way that you're going to understand. I'm going to show you in a way that you're going to believe this is true. He could choose not to do that. He could have chosen to just go real laissez-faire, hands off, and say, all right, well, you guys are really mucking up everything I created, so whatever, just do your thing. And he could have never stepped back into the story and we could just all be running around blowing stuff up and destroying everything. I mean, sure, we kind of do that anyway, but he still has that grace to lean in and go, hey, I'm here, in such a way that we acknowledge and we're able to acknowledge that he is there.
Yeah, the same way that he sought out Adam and Eve after they sinned.
Yep. It's almost like this whole thing in Genesis just keeps repeating over and over. Yes, it does. Cool. Well, that is the promised kingdom. Next, we're going to jump into the partial kingdom. And the partial kingdom is going to take up 2 episodes. And here's why. Because the partial kingdom is literally from Abraham to basically the end of the Old Testament. The only thing we're really not going to cover as far as like narrative goes is the prophets, and that's because they get their own section. So we're going to cover pretty much the narrative of the Old Testament in 2 episodes, and so it's going to be action-packed, all kinds of fun. We're going to talk about people, and
we're going to nerd out like crazy.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. We're going to try not to get into too many details too often, or it'll become like 3 and 4 episodes, and I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
It'll be fun.
I'm excited.
But here's what we need you guys to do today as this episode is ending. What do we need them to do?
Hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss our podcast episodes when they come out.
That's right.
Go ahead and share it with your friends on social media so that people can learn about us. Give us a rate and review, please. 5 stars and happy words. We appreciate that so much. It just makes us, warm and fuzzy on the inside.
Yeah, it is. We love reading those reviews. Yeah. They're so good.
They are. They're awesome. Thank you guys for doing that. We could read them off.
We could read them off. Do you have them right here, right now?
No, I don't, but we'll do that in the future.
Yes, we'll do that in the future because we're not all about editing episodes.
Right. So keep those coming, and then just tell us what's messy in your life. You can go to Nope, got it wrong.
Yeah. We've both gotten it wrong now. It's anchor.fm/bowlsoflife, and on there you can record a message telling us what's messy in your life that you're loving.
We'd love to feature your voice on our podcast when you do that. So do that.
100%.
Join us. We love you.
Yes. Thank you guys so much for joining us in this podcasting
Have
journey.
a great Thanksgiving.
Great Thanksgiving. See you guys again soon.
Pew, pew, pew.